CNN's Caitlin Polantz and Jessica Schneider are here. Caitlin, let's start with the newest reporting. This from Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal, just a couple of minutes ago. What are they reporting?
That's right, Victor. Alex Leary at the Wall Street Journal appears to have obtained or at least seen a good amount of the documents here that would be within this search warrant case, the search warrants itself, as well as the receipt handed to Donald Trump and his attorneys when the FBI left, seizing items. Specifically, the Journal's reporting that it is 11 sets of classified documents that were removed from Mar-a-Lago on Monday. If you break it down, if you look in the story, it says one set of documents marked as various classified TS/SCI documents. That's sensitive compartmented information. That is a very high classification of classified information where only special people in certain circumstances are able to access those sorts of records, TS/SCI. There's also 4 sets of top secret documents that were removed from Mar-a-Lago, 3 sets of secret documents, and 3 sets of confidential documents. Those are different levels of classification in the system. We also know from the Journal reporting is that that they are saying that the search warrant itself authorized the search of the 45 office, so Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, as well as all storage rooms and all other areas, rooms or areas within the premises used or available to be used by the former president and his staff, and in which boxes and documents could be stored. So that is the new reporting, and we still are awaiting seeing whether this is indeed exactly what the document says, if there's anything else in those documents as well.
All right, Caitlin, stand by. Let's go to Jessica now and this Washington Post reporting on the FBI search potentially for documents related to nuclear weapons. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Victor, so everything's really dovetailing here. You know, what Caitlin reported with what the Wall Street Journal has said was in these documents, in these boxes. What the Washington Post said was that this is all related to nuclear weapons. You know, our team was told that investigators, you know, they had this evidence that potentially classified documents were still at Mar-a-Lago, and that was even after the National Archives retrieved those 15 boxes of documents back in January. You know, so investigators believed here that the documents that remained at Mar-a-Lago had national security implications. We're seeing from the Washington Post related to nuclear weapons. And we also learned from our team that some of the boxes had information that were part of special access programs. This is a classification that severely limits who has access to this information since it is so hypersensitive. So all of this dovetailing with what the Wall Street Journal now reporting about these 20 boxes of items, 11 sets of classified documents. The Washington Post saying agents specifically sought these classified documents related to nuclear weapons. So, you know, Victor, given these huge national security implications here, you know, that's likely what prompted this court-sanctioned search on Monday. And as the Attorney General said yesterday, the Justice Department usually seeks alternatives to a search like this. But, you know, our team has reported over the past few days that investigators had been to Mar-a-Lago in recent months. They talked with Trump's attorneys, and then those attorneys were even told to secure a storage area at Mar-a-Lago, likely because of the concern that even more classified documents remained. So a lot of likely national security concerns here, and of course looking at that looming 3 p.m. deadline, potentially getting more detail about what those agents took once it's determined whether or not the Trump team is going to fight unsealing this search warrant. Victor?
All right, let's take that now back to Caitlin. And the detail here is that the judge asks Trump's attorneys not to come back to him, but to alert the DOJ by 3 o'clock. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is a case that was opened by the Justice Department. It was under seal initially. It still is under seal, all the documents in it. And so what was happening is the judge said, Justice Department, talk to Donald Trump now that you have requested to unseal these documents in the search warrant, and let me know because they are the controlling attorneys right now in that case. So we are still waiting. We are within the hour of the deadline. It's 2:05 right now. 3 o'clock is the deadline. We have not seen anything from the Justice Department or from Trump's team other than a late night statement from Donald Trump on social media saying he was encouraging the immediate release of those documents. And the Wall Street Journal report doesn't really indicate where they were able to obtain access either. It is just citing documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. So we still don't even know what final position Donald Trump and his team will be taking in court, whether they actually support the release of these documents or not.
All right, we will know in just minutes, of course, that deadline not far away. Caitlin Polantz, Jessica Schneider, thank you both. We'll bring you back when you have new reporting. Let's bring in now CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. He's also a former federal prosecutor. And Joshua School, a former FBI executive assistant director for intelligence. He's now president of the Bowave LLC. Thank you for being with us both. Elie, let me start with you. I'm going to get to process later. Let's start with this reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Your biggest takeaway from this list in this new reporting?
So the biggest takeaway, Victor, is that the FBI seized from Mar-a-Lago documents of all different levels of classification, from the lowest level, which is confidential, up to the highest level of the normal classification chain, which is this SCI, sensitive compartmented information. That is a big deal. We've heard reporting along these lines for the last several days. According to the Wall Street Journal now, there are documents confirming that. The B story here is in the description of the areas of Mar-a-Lago that the FBI wanted to search. That is very general. It essentially says any rooms other than the guest rooms. It's not as specific as we had thought it might be. There's no specification of the basement. There's no specification of the safe, again, according to the Wall Street Journal reporting. So it seems they went in there with a fairly broad mandate.
Joshua, let me come to you now. One set of these documents marked as top secret SCI. What documents are in that echelon, the very top of the pyramid of classified documents?
So, Victor, that would be the most sensitive secrets of the United States, likely classified to protect sources and methods. It would dovetail with other sensitive reporting we've seen regarding the capture of nuclear information would be in there. Certainly significant signals intercepts would be in there as well, or could be in there.
So when there are questions about whether this had to be a search warrant executed, when you have this breakdown, the list of these 11 sets of classified documents, these are the types of documents that you go in and retrieve. You don't wait to ask, can you hand these over? You get a judge to approve them so you can bring them back to the U.S. government.
I would say that it'll be interesting to read what triggered the search warrant. It looks in the timeline that the former president's lawyers were cooperating and turning over these documents. And then sometime between May and the execution of the search warrant, there seems to be something that triggered that. Because if they were aware in May that there was sensitive material in that room, one might think that they should have acted sooner.
One more for you. This top secret SCI. Do you know, and maybe you don't, this is just something I consider on the walk up here, if a former president still retains the clearance to view information at that level? Of course, when he is the executive, he has that clearance, but after he leaves the office, does he retain it?
So he likely, yes, he retains his clearance level, but in order to have access to classified information, you need two things. You need the clearance level and the need to know. Now, often former executives in the intelligence community, certainly the president, may have that need to know and have the classification. We won't know until we see the documents.
You talked about this. I want to get a little more into it about the breadth of this search warrant, not just a few locations. We know that there was a retrieval of documents in January. There was another subpoena that was obtained before the meeting in June, and then this informant, as we reported yesterday, who said there's more here. Yeah. This warrant looks like the DOJ said, we need to go and find whatever's left to clean it up once and for all.
Yeah, so this is enough detail to put in a search warrant, just legally. If you bring it to a judge, he's not going to say, he or she is not going to say, well, I need you to be more specific. They say, we're not going to go into the guest rooms, we're going to go into the working areas, the offices, that kind of thing. What they don't say is the basement, the safe, this particular room. Now, that could be for one of two reasons. It could be because they just didn't know. FBI did not have that level of specificity. Or it could be because they did have that level of specificity. They knew where to look, but they didn't want to potentially expose or out the CI, because maybe the thought was, well, if we know to go in this one particular very specific room or location, that could tip people off that so-and-so is the informant here. When I say CI, I mean confidential informant.
Yeah.
So there could have been one of two tactical reasons for that.
All right. Joshua, let me get one in more to you and then back to Elie on process. These documents, as sensitive as they are, one set at the very highest level, 4 sets of documents that were top secret, have been at Mar-a-Lago, a beach club for a year and a half. How is that possible? Is there no survey of these documents, the strict controls over them? How have they been there so long?
That's an excellent question, Victor. I don't know. There are folks that have access to classified information, certainly at the highest levels, TS, SCI. Those documents are required to be maintained in a SCIF or be escorted. I don't know the answer, and I'm sure in the coming days we will be finding out more and more, certainly when they release the affidavit, certainly as we continue to read other reporting that's going on and how that got mixed in and was not separated when the president left the White House. If I might, on the document search warrant, to Ellie's point, it reads like a normal document search warrant. It is someplace where any place that these documents could be stored or located. That's how I interpret that.